Welcome to Report from the Climate Crisis. My name is Camille Nasser. We report every couple of weeks, and we have a different program, different part of the climate crisis. I have the great pleasure of having Carol Zoubek here. And we're going to talk about soil and regenerative agriculture. Welcome to the show, Carol. Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
So I always start by asking a personal question.
Okay.
How did you get interested in the climate? And you came from the investment world, right?
Right, exactly.
And you changed, or what happened?
I'm still in the investment world, kind of taking a little bit of a break to do a lot of research, because I try to incorporate a lot of the social responsible investing, but I always felt something was missing. And then a handful of years ago, I found regenerative agriculture, and my favorite part about regenerative agriculture is it solves so many problems, and it's such a positive mind frame.
So you've got to define regenerative agriculture for those of us who are a little ignorant. So the soil is very important for climate change, isn't it? Because in the carbon cycle, what happens is trees, bushes, plants, they take up carbon, then they die, and they release the carbon into the atmosphere, right? And
that's part of it, but the key thing they've realized is the power of the photosynthesis, and they're calling it like liquid carbon. And that especially when you have very healthy soil, because the problem is when you study it on unhealthy soil, you don't really fully see what's going on. So a number of folks decided to go find the healthiest soil and say, what's happening here, instead of too much of the studying has been like in labs or what have you. And organic is a wonderful first step, but the key thing regenerative, it seems to be, is best practices organic. When they really fully you treat the ground as what it should be. It's a living system. Mm-hmm. So when you're restoring it, it's basically, are you improving it? Yeah. Any action that you do, are you improving it or are you degenerating it?
Right.
Because there is a statistic saying that we literally only have about 60 years left of healthy soil.
Healthy soil, yeah. So what are the 5 principles? Are you going to remember these, the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture?
At least disturbance. Living roots.
Least disturbance, define it.
Least disturbance. At first they were calling it like just no-till or no disturbance, but they realized you got to have some disturbance. But as long as you have the proper mindset where this is a living system, so that the incredible root system and all the organisms, you don't want to kill them. Like simple earthworms.
Yeah.
So. And too heavy of machinery. You're going to need some machinery to do the planting, but they come out machines that do less of the disturbance. Mm-hmm. And also, obviously, with chemicals. We really want to drastically reduce the amount of chemicals.
Right.
And technology can come into play where, drones, during the transition, they could help at least drastically reduce. Until the land becomes healthier, the drones can pinpoint, okay, only here, apply it, because this is like the worst area. But don't have those big planes or have these poor workers in hazmat suits literally applying all these chemicals. That's just, and it kills so many more of the microbiome that's so important.
So what are the other aspects of organic regenerative?
So, the making sure that there's living roots. There used to be an assumption that at all times anything that's in the ground is sucking up all the nutrients. Whereas if you have a healthy system, there's a lot of exchange going on, so that the liquid carbon comes down, feeds the microbiome, and the microbiome then will, through their excretions, will provide bioavailable nutrients back to the plants. And especially when the biggest part is biodiversity. Emphasis is to not do this monoculture.
Right.
The monoculture, it's like obvious when you think about it. It's a smorgasbord for the insects you're trying to, kill. But if you have a proper biodiversity, you literally have a better balance of, you have beneficial insects that they will take care of, like dragonflies. They'll take care of the mosquitoes, and ladybugs will actually take care of the tomato aphids, and yeah, that's.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about monoculture, because every time I go to California to visit my my brother who lives in wine country, it's just Sonoma County. Sonoma County has more wine than more grapes than Mendocino, or Napa rather, and it's just one field of grapes after another. They destroyed everything else because grapes make much more money than apples and pears and all the other things that used to grow there. And I just, it seems very tenuous. It seems like the back in the old days of the Irish who had potatoes.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
So yeah, when you have the proper balance, then they're proving there's going to be a lot less disease that you have to deal with. But again, it's a process to convert over. But fortunately, there's enough farms around the world that's proving a key thing. It ends up being profitable because you literally reduce the input costs. Because up front, when you apply, like the artificial fertilizer, it will kick up the quantity. It will not help the quality, and that's the other real big focus for regenerative agriculture. Is we now want to focus on nutrient density and the quality of it, which.
Right. Yeah, so we could learn a lot from the native people about this, because.
Absolutely, because I was just going to mention the Three Sisters concept, where there's three plants that work beautifully together, because regenerative takes in so many different concepts like agroecology, and the corn and the squash and the legumes work beautifully together, whether the beans give a better structure for the corn, and the legumes provide a natural source of the nitrogen, kind of like when sometimes when we take too many vitamins and we end up you
Right.
see it come out of you.
Yeah.
So it's versus if we take it naturally, it's more naturally available. Our microbiome. We talked about probiotics, and we understand that, but we realize that's what needs to be put back into the unhealthy soils, the whole microbiome.
So I understand that taking probiotics is not a good idea. Is that right?
It's better. It's the concept is correct, but it's better actually to do it up front in the healthy soils, so
Right.
that we eat much healthier food that will naturally provide it to us. Mm-hmm. So they were starting with the general right concepts, but we're stepping, because there's some incredible experts out there that really are looking at the whole holistically, and that's the sixth principle that they added was context and your mindset, because what was happening is there's a cover crop, and so somebody in a totally different landscape would find that such and such cover crop works, and then somebody in a totally different landscape would try that and say it doesn't work. And we're like, of course it doesn't work. That doesn't work in your landscape.
Yes. Yeah. So the native people used to plant they used to mix, right?
Absolutely.
Corn and beans and squash and all, and that was much better. They also, I understand, they used to put fish in with the
Absolutely.
to help the soil. Yeah.
Yes, and I love the book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, and she's a wonderful person to learn from because she grew up in the indigenous world, but she also took she has many degrees from the Western agriculture, so she really understands how to help and create a much better balance. For instance, plants are made to harvest, but just take 50%. Don't take all of it, because you take all of it, you're taking away the regenerative aspect of it. And it's also another favorite part that I've been diving into it is it brings so many more people out into nature. It brings people, because it really encourages local and help with community gardens and getting back into nature, so that we'll actually reduce our amount that we're using electricity.
Right. And you talk about community gardens and local produce. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Why is local better than the stuff we get from Peru?
Well, many reasons, especially because of the transportation costs, but it's also really helps focus on making sure that all the land near you is making sure that it's being regenerated. And they're learning so much that, getting back to more native, and it's a balance between higher percentage of native, not just all or nothing. And the key thing with the native, it's lower maintenance cost. It takes less, because it's adapted to the area that you're in, and it's so much healthier. It's like compost. Adding compost really helps to increase the health of the soil, and so that it helps to clean the bad quality soils.
Okay, all right. Talk to me about perennials versus annuals.
Absolutely. And again, it's a percentage thing. We've had too much focus on annuals. In fact, they've seen with the NASA climatology studies that every year during the biggest time of when we plant, it's because we've been planting too much annuals, and we need to totally plant a new harvest, and you're disturbing the land. Versus having a higher percentage of perennials, you don't need to plant as much. And the other really important part is perennials will keep growing deeper and deeper into the ground. And a key thing that regenerative is also with local is bringing back the small water cycles, which would literally, the healthier soils helps to improve the infiltration rate. So when it rains, instead of all the runoff, the healthier soils will literally take in that water. And there's one of the many groups that I'm studying, we have this woman who's from Malibu who after the fires, there was a drone that went around, and so all this burnt out property, and in the middle of it was this green oasis. And they went down and they asked, "What are you doing?" And it was regenerative agriculture, because it helps with resiliency, because it actually was storing the water both in the soil and with all the living root systems that she had. And the perennials is key, because the root systems are and it helps to replenish the water systems.
So let's, I guess, like corn and soy, the plants that are most common in the United States, in the Midwest, they're annuals. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Right, primarily, and that's the other thing is really. We need a lot more biodiversity, and it's too much focus on the corn and the soy, especially for feedlots. And that's the thing, is that it's as I've mentioned, it's not the cow, it's the how.
It's the cow and the how. I want to tell you, this is a report from the climate crisis. I'm Camille Nasser, and I have the great pleasure of talking with Carol Zoubek. Now, let's go back to this the Midwest is famous for supplying so much of corn and soybean. It almost all goes to animals, right?
Exactly, and Regenerative definitely wants to shift that, because basically there's plenty of land that the grasslands, if you manage it properly, the grass can grow much higher and provide so much more food per acre, so you literally are reducing the acreage, and you're not transporting the grain from the Midwest to all these other ranches.
And the
across
grain
the
is something that cows are not supposed to eat anyway.
Exactly,
it's not natural,
exactly.
Yeah. But so you're talking to a vegetarian here, but you're not, right? You.
I totally respect vegetarians, and I love animals, and that's the other key thing with monoculture is even when you're growing vegetables, if it's the soil is not healthy, and so you're killing a lot of really important organisms. Simple things like the insects that a number of people are hearing that we're at the extinction, and
yes,
it's really important food for those beautiful birds, and or many other animals that
we've reduced.
So we're killing and inadvertently killing by the how. And there's a number of vegans I've come across that's like, do you have friends and family that'll never give up their meat?
Yeah.
And it's so at least let's provide the meat in the healthiest way possible. And again, the focus on nutrient density will satiate people so they'll eat less. And then the other,
yes, but every nutritional study that I've seen says eat less meat. Well,
it's basically
maybe not eliminate, but eat less meat. So
there's definitely people, especially in certain areas of America, people are eating way too much meat, definitely. So they can reduce it, but when you do eat the meat, make sure it's from the healthiest source.
So we're also talking a little earlier about Suzanne Simard's book, and I just bought it because I heard a talk. I belong to this Buddhist group, and somebody gave a presentation about it, and so I just bought it. I haven't read it yet, and her idea is that we need diversity, and in a forest where there is diversity, the trees talk to one another through their mycella and through their fungus, through their roots, and they help one another. They give the mother tree. The book is called Finding the Mother Tree, and the mother tree nourishes just like the mothers of animals nourish their young. They nourish their young too, and it's a very interesting cause. I'll talk about it more when I read the book. But
I've read the book and I've actually seen her speak.
Really?
I'm involved with the Bio for Climate group too. And she basically proved that when certain trees are lacking and the root system will, and another tree has an abundance, it'll literally, through the root system, feed the carbon or whatever nutrient to another tree. It's very, very involved.
It's amazing. We never thought about this, and she showed it scientifically. She's a scientist.
Exactly. She's been studying it for over many years, and she had a lot of pushback, and she finally, a number of other people are finally, as I said, the whole healthy soil thing, are really realizing all what's really going on underneath the soil.
So how does the soil absorb carbon? Does it absorb carbon from the atmosphere?
Basically, it's through good old photosynthesis. Our best renewable energy is plants pull that in, and they call it a liquid carbon, and it feeds the whole. Not only is the plant using it, but it's basically feeds the whole healthy soil, the microbiome through the mycelium. It's very, very involved, but the gist of it is. There's a lot more exchange going on in the healthy soil. So and again, the perennials really help with the deeper root system,
Yeah.
so that the storage of the carbon can go down even further. And hesitate to use the word storage because it actually is to be used.
Yes, yes. So what a photosynthesis does is it takes water from the plant and carbon dioxide from the air, and it splits the carbon dioxide. What's called fixes the carbon dioxide, and the carbon is, of course, what is so important. And the oxygen it just gives off, which is for us, it's the most important thing, but it's really a byproduct of the reaction that takes place. And the carbon is fixed. First, it becomes a pyruvate, and then it becomes glucose. And that's what gives nutrients to the and you could see. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
You could see, and when you take the Earth. The amount of carbon dioxide increases during the winter time and decreases during the because the plants suck it in, and then they stop sucking it in because most of the Earth's surface or the land is in the northern hemisphere. So most of that happens in our summertime. You could see this here in New England, our spring and summer, that the carbon is reduced because all these leaves are photosynthesizing. That's one of my favorite subject, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And also, there are a number of ways that people are extending the growing seasons, including concepts like the hot composting. Put that in a greenhouse, and you can extend the growing season in the Northeast.
So talk to me about the different types of composting. That's another favorite subject of mine because I'm a big composter, and I remember the first time I really composted many years ago, and I remember putting my hand right next to the pile of compost. I had been turning it over, and you feel the heat of it, and then it turns. Eventually, you turn it over, and eventually it turns to dirt, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah, again, it's an extension of the living systems, and so when you treat making the compost as you need to be feeding the microbiome, that's helping to break down the ingredients. So. It needs air and water, so that's when you turn it, and also when you chop up, mulch the leaves, and when you also try to chop up the food scraps. You don't need to be exact on that. It's more of a percentage game because some of the larger pieces help provide the air. But the key thing is, for instance, with the water, too dry, not good, but too much. So as moist as a wrung-out sponge. I love that concept.
Yeah, I've heard the same expression.
And it's the coolest thing when people are involved and we come across earthworms going through the piles, and you know how active they are. But that's the thing. It's like it's an individual choice of what's best. For some people love worms, and the vermicomposting is great. Some people are real technical, so there's a lot of technical ways you can do the composting. So it's not, some people think that, it's too complicated with so many options. It's like, no, look at it more so what resonates with you.
Yeah. So we're talking a little about putting coffee grinds into the soil. I do that too, yeah. And that's good, right? You should.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a nitrogen source.
Right.
It's a key nitrogen source, but we also have, I'm helping at a place that we also have grass clippings and then the food scraps. So what I try to do, again, meeting the biodiversity, you can just do the leaves and the grass clippings, that's fine, and that's awesome. But if you could also then mix in, coffee and the food scraps, that will really help make it even more nutritious.
So should a farm be using fertilizer? Commercial fertilizer, nitrogen? I mean, are you going to tell a big grower of, let's say, tomatoes in the Midwest, hey, don't use any of those fertilizer?
Well, fortunately, a lot of the larger companies are realizing, they're seeing the success of the smaller places, and they're realizing that it helps to, when you build back healthy soils, you have the bioavailable nitrogen that's in there, so you don't need to apply this artificial, especially because they're realizing more proof of how much it's running off. It's like, I'm spending all this money on applying this, and it ends up running off.
And as it causes a real problem running off, because it runs off, it eventually ends up in the sea and causes all kinds of problems.
And lots of lakes are having horrible algae problems.
Exactly.
And
exactly,
but again, it's. I mean, I went back and took a whole bunch of courses, and one of the key concepts is biodiversity and dosage. So it's like too much nutrients, it ends up being in a lake, because nitrogen is technically a nutrient. Yeah. So it's awesome that the bioremediation, where a number of plants will, lakes will, like I'm in Wakefield, and Lake Quannapowitt, they're doing beautiful work around the lake where they're adding bioretention areas. So they're adding wonderful plants, and so it's helping to reduce too much.
In the 30 seconds we have left, what do you want to leave us with? What's your idea that we should be more concerned about nature?
The concept of sustainable is great as far as stopping doing things, but it's like, okay, now we stopped and we degenerated some. Regenerative is we need to restore. So if we really are mindful of restoring the living world and really biodiversity, it's very powerful.
You heard it here. Report from the Climate Crisis. I'm Camille Nasser.